Objective 1.2.6, Zero Trust. I started with this objective with a black background, and the intention is that Zero Trust is still a very obscure concept for many people. So I will try to do my best to explain this concept in a way so that after this session, you should be able to understand exactly what zero trust is. What is zero trust? Zero trust is a modern security model founded on the design principle never trust, always verify. It requires all devices and users, regardless of whether they are inside or outside an organization's network, to be authenticated, authorized, and regularly validated before being granted access. In short, Zero Trust says don't trust anyone until they have been verified. Now, when we say everyone, we're not talking about necessarily people. We're not talking about the people's trust. We're talking about in the context of the network architecture. Now, of course, people have user accounts, and the fact that I don't trust a user account trying to authenticate, it doesn't mean that I don't trust that person as a person. I'm just saying, well, what about if someone is impersonating that user and that user of course doesn't know that he has been hacked? So in the architecture, I'm gonna say, well, let me verify through whatever means it is that I'm using to, to verify. It could be, for example, MFA. When a user tries to sign in, there may be circumstances in which you say, well, this usually normally signs in from the United States, but now he is signing in from France. We should have visibility into that. The programs that we use, the identity portion of the program that we use, and should be able to say, well, okay, this is a different location. Now, of course, it could be a legitimate sign in. Maybe that person is traveling to France, and that happens all the times. But I'm not sure. So I am going to request that that sign in is authenticated by um, asking the person to provide MFA, for example. So that's kind of an example. Now I will go more in detail. And again, my intention is that at the end of this session, uh, you understand what zero trust really is. So let's take a look at this picture, right? Um, there is an engine in zero trust, right? At the center of the zero trust is this security mechanism. For simplicity, let's use this zero trust security guard, if you want to call it, right? There are many components of an architecture, an enterprise architecture. So where do you start? And I think that this is the main point. It's like when we talk about zero trust, a lot of people don't have an idea. Okay, so if I want to implement zero trust, how do I do it? Where do I start? They go to a company, and a lot of company provides zero trust help and guidance, and their product would help with zero trust. But zero trust is not a product. So whoever comes to you and say, oh, well, I guarantee 100% security, our zero trust, product will do everything for you. Well, that's a lie. That's not true. Okay, there's a lot more to it. But so one of the key components of any network and one of the problems of any uh, company nowadays is handling identities. Identities is extremely difficult in the internet. So Um, a lot of recommendation, a lot of best practices is that start with identities. So forget about everything else for a second, right? Actually, you shouldn't forget. I mean, it's a balance, right? But let's start with identity. So you have a company, you've been operating. Obviously, you do have a lot of security controls in place. You have a lot of stuff, but how do you reshape and say, well, okay, I want to change my mindset. I want to change the way that we have been doing things, and I want to apply this new concept of the zero trust. Well, so start with the identities, right? The first thing is that if you are not using MFA to authenticate users, not only the users that come from the outside, not only the users that are working remotely from home or from a hotel or whatever, or your partners that are, authenticating to your network from the outside. A lot of people, but obviously, that is, you must do that. You gotta do that, right? That authentication. So let's start with MFA. There are different forms of MFA. Um, the simplest form of MFA is SMS, and that is fine. Now, obviously, if you could move to, let's say, a push MFA, like the using either the Microsoft Authenticator app or using the Google app or using something like Duo, and there is a push button where, actually sometimes even stronger because it's what's called MFA tamper proof, where you not only push a button or something, but there's also a number that's there that, they say, okay, so is that really you, right? So again, there's many ways, and in very high security environments like the federal government, there's also a security key, a YubiKey that you could use that would make it. But anyway, so um, the simplest form of MFA, which is SMS, would be able to deter, to stop a great number of identity breaches. So again, start with the identities. Then we have devices. Well, eh, people need devices to access, whatever. So identities are related to devices in a way that you need either an iPhone or an Android, you need a Windows PC. Well, those devices obviously must be protected with, let's say, endpoint security. You could start there. Then you have your applications. The applications have to be secure as well. What applications do you have? Are there applications that the IT team is installing that you're not aware? Or we'll talk later on about shadow IT. Maybe the marketing department have signed for a SaaS application that you're not aware, right? So you need to curate or sanitize your application. That's another key point over there. Obviously, you need to protect your networks. And this is a point that I think traditional networks have been, well, people have invested most of the money, buying the expensive firewalls and that kind of stuff. And that's good. You still need to continue doing that, but you have to don't put all the money in your networks and your firewall, because that's not going to stop an identity uh, uh, breach someone that's coming from the outside, right? And obviously, you have your data. In ultimate instance, everything we do is we want to protect that data. So if you're not classifying your data, if you don't have uh, data sensitivity labels and that kind of stuff, well, again, I think that this is an area that uh, most companies are very vulnerable. If you're not using encryption, for example, you have to encrypt the data as best as you can, whether it is at rest, in transit, or in memory. So, and obviously you need to protect your infrastructure. We're talking about your databases. We're talking about your virtual, uh, your VM, your Azure, your machines, your Windows. So you need to protect all that stuff, the whole the whole infrastructure, of course. So these are some of the key points of the zero trust, and we will go more in detail and explain what they're saying. But again, start with identities and maybe devices with endpoint security. So that's key, and then you can move on along. But if you really want to start with zero trust, you got to start somewhere, and then identities should be one of those places. The zero trust architecture, again, so it's a new enterprise security strategy and mindset. So as I said before, zero trust is not a product. It's a new way of doing things. Zero trust is rooted in the principle of, again, never trust and always verify. It provides a robust framework designed to prevent data breaches and secure sensitive information. That's the whole point. List privilege access, microsegmentation, and continuous verifications are a key component of this zero trust architecture. The zero trust architecture assumes no implicit trust and is granted to assets that is granted to assets or identities, right? There's no implicit trust, just like we have always done it. Oh well, if it comes from the outside, it's untrusted, and then we have this DMZ and all that stuff. But anything that's inside, it's trusted. Well, that's an old thing. We need to change our perspective. We need to change our paradigm. Um, so irrespective of their location, inside or outside, the network perimeter, again, no implicit trust is granted to anything. Um, Users, access, identities, applications, whatever the case may be. As I just mentioned, zero trust security can be applied in multiple ways depending on your architecture, design, and approach. So if somebody comes to you and talking about zero trust and where to start, um, if you look at this network, there's so many points. The recommendation again is that you start with identities. You have to have MFA, but not only externally, also internally. The admins that log into Active Directory internally, um, you need to start there. Even to log in, if you use Active Directory, you need to use MFA to sign into Active Directory internally. That's a key point over there. Again, here we have the devices. You could start with the devices, identity devices, then go to your infrastructure and protect your infrastructure, protect your data by using encryption, by using data classification, sensitivity labels, using DLP. Um, Zero trust can be complex, and it is complex, and it is very expensive. It is. But zero trust is a journey. You will never finish with zero trust because you go in a circle. Once you do something, then you go back again and review to see if those controls are effective. You need to have visibility. You need to have analytics to see what's happening. So yes, zero trust is uh, complex, but I think that a lot of people make it a lot more complex by not understanding exactly what zero trust is and what zero trust is not. Now, obviously, this is um, it would be a big project just to start implementing zero trust, and you would definitely need help. You need technology, you need a vendor. But by understanding the components of zero trust, you are better equipped to select the right partner or partners that would help you in this journey. Okay. There are three uh, core principles in the zero trust architectures, and those are never trust, always verify, assume breach, and apply least privilege access. And we will explain in detail each of these three core principles next. Core principle one, never trust, always verify. This means that you must always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points, including user identity, location, device, data sources, service, or workload. So somebody's signing in into your network. So let's say that you use Microsoft Exchange Online for email, which is a common one of the workloads, one of the services that people used most commonly that on from the internet. So a user is signing to your Microsoft Office 365 platform to use their email or SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever the case may be. The user signs in. Well, in Office 365, there are signing logs that tells you um, the IP address where that user is coming from, the device that that device is using. So let's say, for example, that your company have a policy. Everybody has a Windows laptop and they use Apple devices. And someone is signing in with an Android device. Well, that is a flag because you do not allow, a lot of company do not allow, for example, Android devices, right? Just to give you an example, it could be the other way around, right? Um, but so you gotta have visibility. You could have a conditional access policy in Microsoft that says, well, if somebody signs in from an Android device, you should flag that, you should stop it, or you should send an alert to somebody, right? So there should be visibility. So if the user um, are in the United States and everybody works from the United States, and all of a sudden you see that there's an IP address that is coming from another country, well, that could be a flag. Now, yes, that user may have installed a VPN product and he's probably doing something. Maybe he wants to watch Netflix from another country and he configured the VPN to come from another country. Well, I don't care. You shouldn't trust that. That's when we're talking about not trusting anything. So, well, you should stop that person from being able to authenticate. That may be a false positive. I mean, it's not a bad user. It's just a legitimate user that is using maybe some application that you're not aware of to do that. But all of that should be stopped, right? So that's one point. That's one simple example. Continuous verification means that there's no trusted zone, no devices or users. So we don't trust anybody. So you may say, well, okay, if this user is coming from an Android device, which we don't use, it may be a legitimate user. I don't know, maybe uh, he well, actually, if you prohibit Android devices, there is technology to stop it so that they could never use an Android device. But anyway, so um, continuous verification basically means that you may start that person and maybe have that person re-authenticate and use MFA again, or simply stop it, right? And do not let that connection. At that point, the user, if he doesn't know what's going on, he will call the help desk. Say, hey, I'm traveling. I'm in Germany. I'm in Puerto Rico. Whatever the case may be, and I'm in Dominican Republic, right? And so I want to, what's going on? And the user goes, well, looks at the log, said, well, the problem is that you are signing in from a location that we do not trust, right? Um, and then that can be fixed. But you should have visibility into that stuff. So another key point is that zero trust treats everyone and everything as a potential threat. And this is the key point when we say never trust and always verify. But all of that, you need technology, you need software to do that. And again, Microsoft conditional access is, and this is just an example. And the reason I'm using Microsoft is not because uh, um, I am advertising Microsoft. It's because Microsoft is very commonly used and it's very familiar. But so you could use a conditional access policy in Microsoft to comply with all these features over here. The second core component is assume breach. By assuming your defenses have already been infiltrated, you can take a stronger security posture against potential threats, minimizing the impact if a breach does occur. So, and the principle is that anyone can be breached. And at a point, so the question is whether you're going to be breached or not, but when. It's a matter of timing, right? But eventually, um, you're going to be breached. And if you are never breached, well, lucky you. That's great. But you should work on the assumption that eventually it's going to happen to you. It's like having car insurance, right? Um, I have never had an accident. Well, significant accident, I would say. Actually, I have. But anyway, so let's say that you have never had a car accident. Well, does that mean that because of that, you're not going to pay for car insurance? And believe me, a lot of people actually, that's their mentality. They go, well, I've never had an accident and therefore I don't need car insurance. Well, maybe you don't need to pay that much. Maybe you say, well, I'm a very careless driver and I live in a very safe neighborhood and I never, go out on the highway. That's fine, right? And then you may reduce uh, your car insurance. And a lot of people do that, and that's the way they operate their network. Maybe they don't spend that much money, or they don't really care because they go, well, who's going to breach me? And again, until that day. But my point is, obviously, not all company and not all industry have the same level of risk. So your investment in cybersecurity and whether you need this zero trust approach or not depends on uh, the level of risk that you want to take, your company, your industry, and so forth. So the one of the main points of this assume breach mindset is to limit the blast radius. So what does that mean, right? Um, the extent and a reach of potential damage incurred by a breach. So if something were to happen, how can I uh, stop how can I minimize the impact, right? So by segmenting access and reducing your attack surface, verifying end-to-end encryption and monitoring your network in real time. So you can accomplish those things by doing that. So again, segmentation is really important in zero trust. Instead of having a flat network, with all the devices where every device can talk to any device. Well, you shouldn't do that. You should have maybe have a segment for the HR department, right? Where no computer should talk to that, only just whatever is necessary. Or maybe the engineering department or the research and development. You should limit all those things. Company have subnets, and those subnets should be limited so that if you have servers that have very sensitive information, well, those servers should be in a secure network that is not accessed by all the other devices. So that's what we're talking about when we say limiting the let's say the blast radius, for example. The third core principle of the zero trust is the applied least privilege access. And a lot of company actually do this. We have been doing this forever. So zero trust follows also the principle of least privilege, so POLP, um, which is basically the practice of limited access rights for any entity and only permitting the minimum privilege necessary to perform its function. And again, this is kind of like a well understood, sometimes people that have should not have privilege access do have. And again, um, one of the privileged accounts are like the key to the kingdom. So most of the great attacks are against the IT department. People that, well, when I say the IT department, I mean people that have privileged accounts, right? So you need to be careful about who is assigned what and who does what. So authorization, it's important. Um, the principle of least privilege prevent users, accounts, computing processes, application, etc., from having unnecessarily broad access across a network, which leaves your network vulnerable and creates a higher attack surface in case of a breach. Now, a common thing that happens in a lot of companies is that people change departments, they change role, and those accounts are not reviewed. And then uh, you have people that have access to groups and data that they shouldn't have access anymore because again they don't belong to that group anymore. So those kind of things must be you got to take care of those things. The zero trust 8 pillars are, again, identity security. You must secure your identity. Start with that if you really want to start this journey. Endpoint security, that's the second pillar that you should start with. You need to have a good endpoint security product nowadays. Then you have application security. You must secure your applications. Data security, of course, you gotta use encryption. You gotta use data classification and sensitivity labels. Visibility and analytics. This is important. You cannot protect what you cannot see. You must have technology to be able to have visibility within your whole security component. Automation. This is another part that a lot of companies are implementing. You need to be able to, automation helps with human error. Whatever can be automated, whether it is user creation and termination, which a lot of companies do that already. But again, the zero trust it's implements or one of the pillars is automation. Infrastructure security, of course, really important as well. And network security, which is I think is one of the things that traditionally that's where people spend most of their money. But again, um, zero trust look at security as a holistic approach, and these are the zero trust 8 pillars. All right, so finally we got to the end of this session. This is a long session. There's no way that you can shorten this because zero trust again is a it's a complex. It's there's a lot to it, and as I said, it's a very obscure concept. It's a new thing. It's a new enterprise. Well, it is new compared to traditionally the way we have done things. Zero trust have been around for many years now, but still, it's one of those things that it hasn't taken off the way that only the big companies are working and implemented this, but most medium to small company, they're still kind of lagging behind. They don't really get it. And anyway, so here are the main takeaways from this session. One, Zero Trust is a modern security model that requires continuous authentication and validation of all users and devices before granting access. Two, it eliminates implicit trust in network security using segmentation, threat prevention, and granular access control to protect systems. Three, Zero Trust assumes a breach is inevitable and limits lateral movement within networks, focusing on protecting applications and data. Four, Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA, replaces VPNs by verifying identity and context before granting access, minimizing security risks. Five, the architecture relies on identity security, endpoint security, application security, data security, and continuous monitoring. Six, it enforces three key principles: never trust, always verify, assume breach, and apply least privilege access. And 7, implementing zero trust can be complex, but provides significant security benefits, especially in distributed and remote work environments. That's all for this session. Thank you. Please remember to like my videos if you think that this is useful, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel so that you can be informed when new content is published. See you then.